and giving me the time to talk about some of the ideas that I've been reading in the last few years. Most of the ideas I'm going to talk about here are not mine, of course. I'm not this smart, but I read a lot, and this is one. Most of the ideas I'm going to talk here are from a book by Robert Cialdini. He's like the grandmaster of social psychology, specifically when we talk about attitude change and persuasion. How do you make people to do what you want, or how do you make them change their opinions about something? So, what is this?
The brain.
The brain. I was hoping most of you would recognize it. I'm hoping most of you have one. But although we all have a brain, right? But does our brain only work one way, or does it have multiple modes of functioning? Is it really one, or is it two? Most research nowadays has shown that we have, in fact, not two brains, but two ways. Our brain has two ways of working. One is the one that we typically associate with rationality, with decision making and logic, and that's kind of if X then Y, else something. The coders here know more about it than I do. But the truth is, our world is so full of information and so full of cues and other things that we can use to make a decision, that it grows exponentially, the combinations between those pieces of information, and we have no way, no computing power to look at them all and to compute all the possible results from it. So, as William James, one of the greatest psychologists of all time, said, the art of being wise is the art of knowing what to overlook. And so our brain has two systems. One system, a cold one, where the one that I was talking about, the rational one, where you go by a rule-based system, and the hot one. We all know the hot one too, because we all know what are emotions, and how our emotions can make us act in ways that go against what we think is the most rational choice. These two systems are typically known as System 1, the fast one, the automatic one that works in parallel, and the System 2, is a slower one. It demands effort from us. Most of the times we don't use that one, because that's the one where you have to, you're going to waste a lot of resources processing the situation in front of you. And in a way, this illustration captures how one works and how the other one works. And how does this System 2 work? It works through heuristics, not in the UX sense, for those here who work with heuristic evaluation. And biases. What are heuristics? Heuristics are simply rule of thumbs. I like things that are pretty. This is a rule of thumb. You have, or I think that someone who is dressed in a suit is more credible than someone who's dressed casually. These are rules of thumb that most of the times they do their job, and they allow us not to look at each situation and try to figure out all the possible combinations of that situation. Biases, on the other way, are natural tendencies to response. If I ask you, all of you, to randomly say yes or no, most of you, I'm not going to do it, but most of you were going to say no, because that's the typical answer when you have no information to make a decision, and that's what I will be asking you, to say yes or no to what, I don't know. So we tend to be to play on the safe side, and we tend to say no. So that's an example of a bias. One of those biases is the inside bias. And what's this? This is, Sherlock Holmes resumed it in a very good sentence. He said, it's easy to be wise after the event. And most things about, most psychology results, cause that feeling on people. I tell you about some study, and you say, "Oh, of course, I knew it all along." And you spent money to know that. So let's play a game, shall we? I'm going to show you. I'm going to talk about 6 persuasion principles. What are the most important or the most effective ways to make someone comply with a request, or what can we do to enhance our persuasive power? And before talking about each of them, I'm going to show you an image that's related to that persuasion principle, and I'm going to ask you to guess which principle I'm going to talk about, okay? Let's start. Any guesses?
You scratch my back, don't scratch it.
Yeah, that's it. Reciprocity. This is one of the most effective principles of persuasion. I give you something, and you feel compelled to give me something back. If you think about it, when you go in Chicago, you have a lot of people asking you for money. But you have one specific type of people that are Krishnas. They come to you and they give you a little book. It's a gift. I don't want anything from you. I just want to talk with you a little bit. And then afterwards, they're going to ask you for a donation for them. But since they already gave you something, you feel the pressure to give them back also something. There are some studies that show this perfectly. Do you think that if a restaurant waiter would put a small candy on your coffee, do you think that would enhance the probability of you tipping them? It does. If you put one candy in your coffee, in the small plate, I can't recall the word. In the peach. If you put one, it enhances a little bit the probability. If you put 2, it enhances even more. But the most effective way for him to persuade you to tip him is to put 1 and start to go away. And as he's going away, he says, "Oh no, you're a good guy. I'm going to give you another one." And he puts the second one, and that's the way. That's the situation where you would give more, would tip him more. This can be used also in another way. You know, when I could ask you, I'll give the typical example. Do you remember the Watergate scandal? Nixon coming out of office because of a huge scandal. The scandal was in a very short way. Someone from the Republican Party paid a guy to enter the offices of the Democratic Party and mess with them and do a lot of nasty stuff about them. And the guy who did this had convinced the Republican Party to do it because he asked for $1 million to do it, and it would involve prostitutes and all weird things. And they said no. But then he conceived something. He said, okay, let's not make it $1 million. Let's make it 250,000. And this way, since he gave them something, he gave them a discount, they said, oh, that's cheap, well, let's do it. So this is one of the ways that most of the times you know that this works. You said, oh, I want 1,000. Oh, 1,000 I can, oh, okay, I'll make it 500. And then people will comply because you gave them something. You gave them, in this case, a discount. Let's go to the second principle.
Scarcity.
You don't play Nefin. Yeah, but Nefin is right. It's scarcity. In this case, it's water scarcity. And what does this principle say? This principle says that when some resource is perceived, the scarcity doesn't need to be real. People will place a higher value on it. This is a print screen from a G post on Facebook a week ago, I think, on the 3rd of April. And these were people lining up in front of a Supreme store because of some shoes. But they're not some shoes, they're a special limited edition. And this made people be like 2 nights in a row in the street just because they wanted to have something that doesn't exist in large numbers. Let's go to the next one. But you can think of it on the websites you visit every day. You go to Amazon and they say to left. You go to another site and they say this offer is limited and ends on Friday. And you know most of the time that's not true, but it's a cue strong enough to make their bottom line a little bit larger. What's this one?
Mordor.
It's a mix between commitment and Mordor. No, it's commitment and consistency. We crave being perceived and perceiving ourselves, because this need for consistency happens on an individual level also as coherent. We want to people to look at us and they know, okay, that's a guy who does this every time. That's a guy who cares about the environment. That's a guy who cares about poor people, whatever it is. And sometimes this makes us do things that we don't want. The typical experiment for this was researchers went to a neighborhood in the US and they knocked on people's door and they said, oh, sorry, we're doing a campaign to end road, it wasn't road traffic, of course, I can't remember, it was something like people speeding on the neighborhood, something like that. And we need you to put a small sign on your front yard, so people will start to know about our campaign. It was a really small sign, and everybody said yes. 2 weeks afterwards, they went to the same neighborhood, to the same people, and they asked, okay, we noticed our campaign is not working that well, so we need you to put a huge sign on your front yard. And not everyone did, but most people accepted to put the sign there. Truth is, they did this experiment also in an equivalent neighborhood, but they didn't ask people to put the small one first. They went directly with the big one. And what did people say? They said no. But in the other case, since people already committed to being helpful to them and to be preoccupied with road traffic problems, they said yes the first time, and that made them say yes the second time. And this is another example. I don't know if you know these dumb shits, but they're the Westboro Baptist Church. They picket at the funerals of soldiers, and they do a lot of nasty things. But one way that keeps them, one of the things that keeps them doing this is because they are already perceived as obnoxious. And since they're already perceived as obnoxious by us, we say they are obnoxious, but they say they're committed. They tend to keep doing it, so people will look at them and say, this is not the real thing, but people will look at them and say, at least they are the same, they are coherent. Let's go to another one.
Stupidity.
Fanatics and
Crazy people.
It's related to what you're saying. Of course, this relates to fandom, but this affects also people who are not the true fans that go to the line.
it's obsession or
No, this is social proof.
sort of.
Social proof is like you do. When you see people lining up in front of an Apple store, even though you might not really enjoy the Apple product, that causes an effect on you. You tend to look at it and to know that other people want them, and that begins to make you crave also a bit that kind of product. We have another example here. They did a study in the hotels. They wanted to make people stop using the towels each day and putting them to wash. And they left some cards in different hotel rooms, each one with a different sentence. One was saying, help us save the environment, please reuse your towels. The other one was saying, help us save the environment, the money we're going to save is going to be donated to X. And the last one said, please help us save the environment, the majority of our clients already do. And this was the one that caused people to change their behavior. Because when other people are doing it, you want to do it too. This can have some perverse effects. Sometimes we want kids to stop drinking, and this happened in the US. You want kids to stop drinking, so you do a campaign. And in your campaign you say, 85% of kids are drinking, please don't drink! And what do kids do? They say, oh, everybody's doing it! So why don't we? And we have to be really, really careful how we communicate these kind of norms. There are the social norms, because people are really, really strongly guided by them. If you say to people, everybody's doing it, and you don't want that behavior to occur, you're doing it wrong. If you want people to stop doing something, you can't say that the majority is doing it. You have to focus on the people who are not doing it. We have one of the easiest examples, and thinking about Facebook, is I do something in every Facebook post. Almost every one I do. To brands, not in my own Facebook post. After I do the post, I log in with my profile, and I'll do a like on the post. Because when people start seeing that the post already has likes, they start liking it too. And most of the times they don't even read the post. It's just because everybody's doing it, I'm going to do it too. Let me show you an example of the power of
Laziness?
No. Of the power of conformity.
The gentleman in the elevator now is a Canon star. These folks who are entering, the man with the white shirt, the lady with the trench coat, and subsequently one other member of our staff will face the rear. And you'll see how this man in the trench coat tries to maintain his individuality. But little by little, he looks at his watch, but he's really making an excuse for turning just a little bit more to the wall. Now we'll try it once again. Here's the Canon subject. Here comes the Canon camera staff. 3 of them at least. And this man has apparently been in
And the last ones are available.
with his hat on in the elevator. First he makes a full turn to the rear and Charlie closes the door. A moment later, we'll open the door. Everybody's changed positions. We'll see if we can use. Now we'll see if we can use group pressure for some good. Now, in a moment, on Charlie's signal, everybody turns forward. Notice.
I love him. Oh no, he was born in the same city as I was. Oh, I love it. No, it isn't. These are subtle cues that don't work on a conscious level, but on an unconscious level, they perceive familiarity, attractiveness. They make you like people more. There are several ways that we can use this example. Here I was using the attractiveness with them and the attractiveness with Monica Bellucci and Vincent Cassel. I hope girls like Vincent Cassel. I tried to get a couple that would be unanimous. And they can like it because I praised you. I can turn to Nika and say, "Oh, that's a beautiful shirt you have today." And this way, I can get Nika to like me a little bit more, and then I can use that to persuade her. There was a study made in the 70s in the US where they looked at insurance companies. The study was they looked at people who had bought insurance and people who had not, and they crossed the information from the people who bought it or not with the people who tried to sell it. And you were more probable to buy insurance from someone who had your name or who was born in the same city as you, who smoked if you smoked, or who didn't smoke if you didn't smoke. All the similarities that you can find had a significant statistical effect. And let's go to another one. Authority. Of course. You tend to obey or to be persuaded by anyone who either has a real authority on you or a perceived authority on you. You have one example, a sad one, that I'm going to talk about. I don't know if you've heard of the Milgram obedience study. Yeah? This was the setup of the Milgram obedience study. This was the subject of the study. This was the experimenter, and this was another experimenter, but that the subject saw was another subject. And the task was very simple. This person was to learn pairings between words and numbers, and this person was to test them. And they would say A, and the other person would say 5 because it was the pair that she studied. And for each time that this person got a wrong answer, this one was supposed to shock them. It was a large machine. It was built by the experimenters to look real. It was a large machine, and it had buttons that went from 10 volts to 20 to 30 to 40 to 220 to 400. And when researchers, before the experiment was done, the researcher who had the idea went to talk to his colleagues, and he said, "Oh, I'm going to do an experiment like this. Do you think people will go to how many volts?" And the others said, "Oh, 50, 70, oh, the maximum 100, and those are the crazy ones." The truth is, most people, not most people, but a big amount of subjects went all the way down. And why did this happen? Because the experiment, when this, let me just say something. When the voltage came over 50, I say, this person would start to say, "I want to stop. This is hurting me. I want to stop." He would even go to say, "I have heart condition. I have a heart condition. Please stop." And the experiment, every time he said that, and the subject said, "I'm going to stop. It's really bad." The experiment would say, "The experiment requires you to continue. The experiment requires you to continue." And one of the best predictors of people going all the way down was if the experiment was dressed in a white coat. Why? Because we tend to associate white coats with medicals and researchers, and it gives them a little extra. Let's just see a little bit of the...
In a unique period from the early 60s to the early 70s, a group of social
So it's
scientists
supposed
conducted a series of experiments
go to 4 seconds.
as teacher, you're seated in front of this impressive-looking instrument, the shock generator. Its essential feature is a line of switches that goes from 15 volts to 450 volts, and a set of verbal designations that goes from slight shock to moderate shock, strong shock, very strong shock, dead shock, extreme intensity shock, finally XXX, danger severe shock. Your job, the experimenter explains to you, is a word pair test. If he gets each answer correctly, fine, you move on to the next pair. But if he makes a mistake, we're instructed to give him an electric shock, starting with 15 volts. And you kick.
Clearly, when we see people went through the top of the shock board, it almost like they were going blithely, sadistically, lethal and stuff.
This experiment was done because of terrible things that happened. We tend to think of Nazis as ruthless people, as they have no emotions, they don't care for anyone. But what this experiment in a way showed was that some of them at least were only following orders. It's not that they didn't have a responsibility on what they were doing, but we tend to forget how the power of authority and how obedience can make us do some things that by moral grounds we wouldn't do otherwise.
One time.
Okay, and the funny thing is, this doesn't, sorry, I didn't remember we would have an academic here, and truth is that the authority doesn't even have to be real. In this Calvin cartoon, he says, I used to hate writing assignments, but now I love them. I realized that the purpose of writing is to inflate weak ideas, obscure poor reasoning, and inhibit clarity. With a little practice, writing can be intimidating and an impenetrable fog. Want to see my book report? And then, the dynamics of interbeing and monological imperatives in Dick and Jane, a study in transrelational gender modes. Academia, here I come. If you talk in a way that people don't... Where's Mark? Remember when we were doing that? If you talk in a way that people perceive as being trustworthy and, oh, the guy knows about it, people will do what you want. We have two examples. This one is a hero for me. It's Alan Sokal. In the 70s, there was a huge growth in postmodernist critics.
Thank you all.
Oh.
Thank you for your...
I hope it wasn't the academic
No,
in the 70s, there was a philosophical, and not only philosophical, literary criticism current growing a lot. It was postmodernist, and Alan Sokal thought these guys are full of shit. They write, they write in a way that it's almost ununderstandable. You can't figure out what they're saying. They just publish papers because no one gets what they're saying, and people say, oh, I don't get it. It must be smart. And what he did, he wrote a paper. Exactly as they did, using quantum terms to justify the relationships between X and Y, and was completely bullshit. And it got published. And it came to be known as the so-called hoax. And a few weeks ago, people discovered that the same thing happens in a lot of papers nowadays, but with computer-generated papers, with the Markov chains kind of thing. They created papers that looked real, but that weren't. And
it's not only the text; it's also actually the font. If you make it smaller and harder to read, this must be very
exactly, fluency. That's perceptual fluency, and it's also one of the things that can apply how you perceive. And the other example I'm going to show you, it's the Dr. Fox lecture. Dr. Fox was a guy that went, Dr. Fox was a guy that went to a college and he gave a lecture. And now we have a lecture of good sounding bullshit. And he never got caught. He got caught eventually when he came out and he said, sorry to tell you that you were you're stupid. So what this means is that if you sound an expert, people will perceive you as an expert. And that's all, folks.